Obrix groaned under its own weight, a sound like metal twisting in agony, as the cargo bay doors slid open to reveal the cold light beyond. Captain Vrelks of the Vorgak fleet stepped in, his claws clicking impatiently on the metal floor. He eyed the containment cells with barely concealed irritation. Inside the cells, human children, small and trembling, their wide eyes glistening with fear, huddled together in silence. Some cried quietly, others tried to console their peers with whispered assurances. The Vorgak guards stood to attention, their shimmering carapaces reflecting the harsh light of the bay. Vrelks' second-in-command, Officer Bresh, approached with what he likely assumed was a proud stride. "Captain," Bresh began, gesturing to the cells, "we captured them during the raid on the human colony of Arinus 7. It was a clean operation. Minimal resistance." Vrelks fixed his piercing crimson gaze on Bresh, his mandibles clicking a sharp staccato of disbelief. "You captured human children?" His voice was slow and deliberate, a warning in itself. "Yes, Captain," Bresh replied, a faint quiver betraying his confidence. "They are strategic assets. Humans value their offspring above all else. We assumed." "You assumed wrong," Vrelks interrupted, his tone icy. "Do you even comprehend what you've done?" Before Bresh could stammer a reply, a faint voice echoed from one of the cells. "Are you here to help us?" A boy no older than 10 had stepped forward. His brown hair was matted, and his face streaked with grime, but his eyes were unwavering. Vrelks froze, his mandibles tightening as if swallowing unspoken words. "Bresh," Vrelks said after a tense silence, his voice low but firm, "release them. Now." Bresh's antennae twitched, betraying a mixture of confusion and alarm. "Release them? Captain, they're a strategic bargaining asset. The humans will what, Bresh?" Vrelks spun around, his towering frame looming over his subordinate. "Beg for mercy? Offer us concessions? Do you even understand who they are? These," he gestured sharply to the children, "are not just offspring. They are seeds of devastation." Bresh blinked, his mandibles opening slightly in surprise. "I don't understand. They are unarmed, defenseless." "You're a fool, Bresh," Vrelks snapped. He turned to the guards. "Open the cells. Now." The guards hesitated but obeyed, their clawed hands moving swiftly to deactivate the force fields. The children remained where they were, their expressions a mix of fear and confusion. The boy who had spoken earlier stepped forward again, his small frame impossibly steady in the face of towering aliens. "Why are you letting us go? Are you afraid of us?" the boy asked, his voice calm but edged with defiance. Vrelks crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to the boy's eye level. "Because keeping you here would doom us all," he said simply. The boy tilted his head, clearly not understanding, but he didn't press further. Vrelks straightened and turned back to Bresh. "Prepare the shuttle and escort them back to human territory. No delays," Vrelks commanded. "But, Captain," Bresh started, only to be silenced by a single menacing click of Vrelks's mandibles. "Do it or I'll eject you into the nearest star," Vrelks growled. As Bresh scurried off to carry out the orders, Vrelks turned back to the children. His crimson eyes scanned their small faces, noting their quiet bravery despite the overwhelming odds they must have faced. "Humans," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. "You may look fragile, but you're the deadliest creatures this galaxy has ever seen." The children watched him silently as the guards began guiding them toward the shuttle. One by one they shuffled past, their tiny footsteps echoing in the cavernous bay. The boy was the last to leave, casting a final glance at Vrelks before stepping onto the shuttle ramp. Vrelks remained in the empty cargo bay, the weight of his decision pressing heavily on his mind. The Vorgak Empire had underestimated humanity before, but this was a mistake that could ripple through the stars. He could only hope the galaxy would survive what was coming. The shuttle's engines thundered to life, vibrations shaking the air as the acrid scent of burning fuel filled the cavernous cargo bay. A faint tremor coursed through the metallic floor, resonating in the stillness left by the children's absence. Vrelks stood silently, watching the vessel lift off and disappear into the void. The children were safe for now. But the unease gnawing at the edges of his mind refused to fade. "Captain," Bresh's voice broke through the silence, hesitant and subdued. He had returned, his antennae twitching nervously. "The Council will demand an explanation for this. Releasing assets of this magnitude." "Assets?" Vrelks turned sharply, his crimson eyes burning into Bresh. "You still think of them as mere bargaining chips? Those children, Bresh, are humanity's greatest weapon." Bresh took a cautious step back, his mandibles clicking uncertainly. Weapon? They're defenseless. I saw no weapons, no signs of threat. Vrelx's claws scraped against the metallic floor as he advanced on his subordinate. Defenseless? Do you know what happens when humans are cornered, when their offspring are threatened? Have you studied their history? Their wars? Bresh remained silent, his antennae twitching erratically, betraying his growing unease. He shifted his weight, his mandibles clamping together in a futile attempt to mask his inner turmoil. Vrelx continued, his tone dark and heavy. They are nothing like us, Bresh. Humans fight not for honor or glory, but to ensure their survival at any cost. They shatter rules, redefine war, and cast aside mercy, all to shield their young from harm. They do not end conflicts, they escalate them. And when they have no other choice, they do the unthinkable. The unthinkable? Bresh whispered, the words barely audible. They call it mutually assured destruction, Vrelx said, his voice a grim whisper. When they cannot win, they ensure no one does. And these children? They are not just innocents. They are seeds of vengeance, survivors who will remember this day, grow strong, and ensure their kind strikes back with unimaginable fury. Bresh's antennae drooped as the weight of Vrelx's words settled over him. But, surely they could be contained, controlled? Controlled? Vrelx barked, his laugh cold and sharp. Humanity cannot be contained, enslaved, or manipulated. Greater empires than ours have tried and crumbled into dust. Humanity is chaos incarnate, beautiful and utterly destructive. For a moment the two stood in silence, the only sound the distant hum of the ship's engines. Bresh's mandibles clicked softly, his thoughts clearly racing. Then, what now, Captain? Now? Vrelx turned toward the observation window, staring into the vast expanse of space. Now we hope the humans see this as an act of mercy, not a provocation. And we prepare. Because if they don't... He let the unspoken threat linger, heavy and foreboding. Bresh hesitated, then asked, should we inform the Council of your actions? Vrelx's crimson eyes narrowed. Inform them if you wish. But if they decide to retaliate, make sure they know this. No Vorgak fleet will survive what comes next. Humans don't forgive. They endure. And they will find a way to make us regret every misstep. Bresh nodded stiffly, then retreated from the cargo bay, leaving Vrelx alone once more. The captain's gaze remained fixed on the stars, his thoughts swirling with a mixture of dread and determination. He had made his choice, but the consequences were far from over. Across the stars, in the heart of the human colonies, the shuttle descended onto a bustling landing pad, its arrival marked by a whirlwind of motion and urgent voices. Rescue workers surrounded the craft, their uniforms emblazoned with the insignias of Earth's unified command. Bright searchlights illuminated the disembarking children, their small forms casting long shadows against the metallic platform. The boy who had spoken to Vrelx stepped off the shuttle last, his small frame stiff with tension. His eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the landing pad with a quiet intensity. The rescuers surged forward, offering blankets and reassurances, but he remained still, his gaze fixed upward. Above him, the stars seemed impossibly vast, a glittering expanse of possibilities and dangers. His small hands clenched into fists as he watched the shuttle's hatch close behind him. Are you all right? A medic crouched beside him, her voice gentle. You're safe now. We'll get you something to eat and... They're afraid of us, the boy interrupted, his voice startlingly calm for someone so young. He turned to the medic, his eyes filled with a wisdom far beyond his years. That's why they let us go. The medic blinked, momentarily at a loss for words. Who's afraid of you? The aliens, the boy said simply. They know what we'll do. Back aboard the Obrix, Vrelx paced the command deck, his claws tapping an erratic rhythm on the floor that mirrored the unease brewing among his crew. The air felt heavy, charged with unspoken fears. Reports from the outer sectors streamed in, detailing human military movements. Each update painted a picture of an empire mobilizing, its fragmented colonies uniting under a single banner. Ships bristling with weapons emerged from dry docks, their designs sleek and deadly. Fleets moved in concert, their precision unervingly efficient. Captain, a communications officer called out, their voice tinged with urgency. We've intercepted a transmission from the human colonies. Play it, Vrelx commanded, stopping mid-step. The audio crackled to life, the voice unmistakably human. It carried a tone of calm resolve, a warning wrapped in civility. To the Vorgak Empire, the transmission began. You have crossed a line. The children you took have been returned, but the act itself will not be forgotten. Humanity has endured countless invasions, countless atrocities. We have survived them all and we will survive you. Vrelx's mandibles tightened as the message continued. We do not seek war but know this. If you dare come for us again, we will respond with a ferocity you cannot comprehend. Our resolve is unbreakable, our vengeance certain. And should you doubt our resolve, remember the lesson of Zirin Prime. Remember the ashes of the fleets that thought us weak. The transmission ended, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. The officers on the command deck shifted uneasily, their gazes flicking toward Vrelx. Prepare the fleet, Vrelx said finally, his voice cold and steady. If humanity is uniting, we must be ready for what comes next. As his crew scrambled to obey, Vrelx turned once more to the stars. Somewhere out there, the seeds of vengeance had been planted. It was only a matter of time before they took root. The stars seemed eerily quiet as the Vorgak fleet began its maneuvers, their colossal warships gliding through the void with a predatory grace. The faint hum of their engines vibrated through the silence, a haunting prelude to the storm. Vrelx stood on the command deck of the Obrix, his crimson eyes scanning the tactical displays that flickered with constant updates. A chill hung in the air, one that had nothing to do with the ship's climate control. Humanity was stirring, their presence veiled but palpable, a storm building on the periphery of Vorgak awareness, ready to strike with calculated ferocity. Captain, the navigation officer called out, we've detected several unidentified vessels on long-range scanners. They're heading towards Sector 17, the forward staging ground. Human ships? Vrelx asked, his tone sharp. The officer hesitated. Uncertain, sir. Their energy signatures don't match anything in our database. Vrelx's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Bring up a visual. The main screen shifted, displaying grainy images of the incoming fleet. At first glance, the ships looked mismatched and clunky, their designs seemingly cobbled together. But Vrelx's experienced eyes saw something else: purpose. These were not random vessels, they were built for war. Humans, he muttered under his breath. Their ingenuity knows no bounds. Orders, Captain? Bresh asked, standing at his side, his antennae twitching nervously. Vrelx's claws tapped against the console. Send a scout vessel to intercept. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. And keep the fleet on high alert. If this is an advance force, we'll need to act swiftly. On the human flagship Resolute, Admiral Kara Drennan stood tall, her uniform crisp, her sharp eyes flicking over the crew with an intensity that carried both assurance and resolve. We have confirmation that the Vorgak are mobilizing. Our sources indicate that their forces are converging near Sector 17. This is our chance to send a message. A murmur rippled through the command center, but it was quickly silenced by Kara's raised hand. They think they can intimidate us, but they've underestimated who we are. Humanity has never needed to match strength for strength. We adapt, we innovate, and we strike where it hurts most. A tactical officer stepped forward, gesturing to the holographic map that hovered in the center of the room. Admiral, their forward fleet has positioned itself near the asteroid belt. It's a heavily fortified area, but it also provides us with an opportunity. Kara's sharp eyes scanned the map. An ambush, she said, her lips curving into a faint smile. We'll use their confidence against them. Deploy the stealth cruisers and position them along these coordinates. She pointed to a cluster of asteroids on the map. When the time comes, they won't see us until it's too late. Back aboard the Obrix, the scout vessel sent to intercept the human fleet returned with its findings. The communications officer's voice trembled as he relayed the report. Captain, the ships are definitely human, but their configurations, they're unlike anything we've encountered before. Weapon systems, propulsion, it's all unconventional. Vrelx's mandibles clicked with agitation. Unconventional is what makes them dangerous. They're always thinking 2 steps ahead. Bresh shifted uncomfortably, his antennae twitching in erratic patterns as he cast a nervous glance at the tactical displays. What are your orders, Captain? Do we engage or hold the line? Not yet, Vrelx replied. If they've adapted their ships, they've adapted their tactics as well. We need more information before we risk open conflict. Deploy observation drones and maintain a defensive perimeter. As the drones launched from the Obrix, Vrelx felt a sense of unease settle over him. The human's silence was unnerving. He had expected them to strike with the same reckless fury they had shown in past encounters. This was calculated, controlled, and that made them far more dangerous. On the Resolute, Admiral Drennan watched as the holographic display updated with new data. The drones are in position, one of her officers reported. The Vorgak are holding back, maintaining their defensive stance? Kara nodded. Good. Let them wait. The longer they hesitate, the more time we have to position our forces. She turned to her communications officer. Send a message to the fleet. Tell them to hold their positions until my command. And remind them, we're not here to start a war. We're here to end it. The officer nodded and relayed the order. As the room bustled with activity, Kara allowed herself a moment to reflect. The stakes had never been higher. Humanity's survival depended not just on strength, but on strategy. Every decision she made now would ripple through history. Hours stretched into an eternity aboard the Obrix as the Vorgak fleet maintained its watchful stance. The tension on the command deck was palpable, every officer's movements sharp and deliberate. Vrelks paced back and forth, his claws clicking against the floor in a steady rhythm. Captain, the navigation officer said suddenly, breaking the silence. We've lost contact with several of our drones? Vrelks froze. Lost contact? How? The officer hesitated. Unclear, sir. One moment they were transmitting and the next, nothing. A cold dread settled over Vrelks. They're already here, he said quietly. Sound the alarm. Bring all ships to battle readiness. Brescia's antennae twitched furiously. But we haven't seen. You won't see them until they want you to, Vrelks snapped. Humans don't play by the rules. Prepare the fleet. As the alarm echoed through the ship, the Vorgak officers scrambled to their stations. Vrelks turned his gaze to the observation window, his crimson eyes narrowing. Somewhere out there the humans were waiting. And he knew that when they struck, it would be with precision and purpose. Hidden among the asteroids, the stealth cruisers of the human fleet remained cloaked, their advanced systems rendering them nearly invisible. Admiral Drennan stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her expression calm but determined. The Vorgak fleet is on high alert, her tactical officer reported. They've spotted the missing drones? Good, Kara said. That means they're nervous. Now we wait. The silence stretched, every second charged with anticipation. Then, finally, the moment came. Admiral, the communications officer said, the Vorgak fleet is repositioning. They're leaving gaps in their formation. Kara's eyes gleamed. And that's our opening. All ships engage. The human fleet surged forward, their ships emerging from the asteroid shadows like phantoms, their sleek forms outlined by the brief, blinding flare of their first volleys. Their weapons lit up the void, streaks of light cutting through the darkness as they targeted the exposed flanks of the Vorgak ships. The battle had begun. The battle unfolded in a symphony of chaos. Bright streaks of light tore through the darkness of space, casting fleeting, fiery reflections on the fractured hulls of ships. Each explosion was a brutal punctuation in a war that felt like the universe itself holding its breath. The Vorgak fleet, disciplined and precise, formed defensive formations as they scrambled to respond. But the human ships moved unpredictably, weaving through the chaos like predators stalking their prey. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Kara Drennan stood unmoving, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm raging around her. Her voice was steady as she issued commands, directing the fleet with an almost surgical precision. Focus fire on their command vessels. Disable their communications and coordination. Admiral, a tactical officer called out, their forward line is collapsing. The Vorgak ships are retreating toward the central cluster. Kara's lips pressed into a thin line as her gaze swept over the tactical display. They're consolidating. They think it will make them stronger. But they've handed us the key to their undoing. Deploy the decoy drones. The order was relayed, and moments later, small, fast-moving drones shot out from the human fleet, their signals mimicking that of larger warships. The Vorgak fleet shifted in response, redirecting their firepower toward the apparent new threat. But the decoys were just a distraction. Stealth cruisers move in now, Kara commanded. Target their core reactors. Aboard the Obrix, Vrelks gripped the console, his claws digging into the metal as he watched the tactical display. The humans were everywhere and nowhere, their ships appearing and vanishing as if taunting the Vorgak fleet. His officers worked furiously, shouting updates and scrambling to adapt. Captain, Bresch called out, his voice edged with panic. We've lost contact with 2 more squadrons. Their ships, they're cloaked. I know, Vrelks snapped, his crimson eyes narrowing. They've turned the asteroid belt into a battlefield. We're fighting blind. Another explosion rocked the ship, sending a shudder through the hull. Vrelks steadied himself and turned to his officers. Focus on defensive measures. Protect the core fleet at all costs. If we lose coordination, we lose everything. But even as he spoke, Vrelks knew the battle was slipping from their grasp. The humans were relentless, their tactics designed to exploit every weakness. For every Vorgak ship that managed to retaliate, 2 more fell to the coordinated strikes of the human fleet. "Admiral, their central cluster is exposed," a tactical officer reported on the Resolute. "We have a clear shot." Kara nodded, her expression grim. "All ships converge. This is our moment." The human fleet moved as one, their weapons lighting up the void as they targeted the heart of the Vorgak formation. The coordinated assault was devastating, tearing through the Vorgak ships with ruthless efficiency. Explosions blossomed like flowers in the darkness, each one a testament to humanity's unyielding determination. Aboard the Obrix, Vrelks watched in horror as his fleet crumbled. He knew the battle was lost, but surrender was not an option. His claws clenched into fists as he turned to Bresh. "Send the order to retreat," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "We've underestimated them." Bresh hesitated, his antennae twitching. "Captain, the Council, they won't." "The Council can debate my decisions later," Vrelks snapped. "Right now, I'm saving what's left of our fleet. Send the order." As the Vorgak ships began to retreat, a cheer erupted across the bridge of the Resolute, a ripple of relief and triumph washing over the crew. But Kara stood motionless, her sharp eyes fixed on the tactical display, her mind calculating the unseen repercussions of victory. She thought of the lives spent and the fragile balance now teetering in their favor. "Hold your positions," she ordered. "Let them go. We've made our point." "Admiral?" a junior officer asked, confused. "We could finish them. And waste resources on a fleeing enemy?" Kara replied. "No. They'll remember this defeat, and they'll think twice before crossing us again." The officer nodded, relaying the order. The human fleet held its position, watching as the battered Vorgak ships disappeared into the void. In the aftermath of the battle, the human fleet regrouped, their ships damaged but victorious. Repairs were already underway, and messages of gratitude and congratulations flooded the Resolute. But Kara's mind was elsewhere. She stood alone in her quarters, staring out at the stars, the faint hum of the ship's systems a backdrop to her heavy thoughts. The victory had been decisive, yet her thoughts lingered on the names of the fallen, their faces etched in her memory like scars on the soul of humanity. Each life lost was a weight she bore silently, a reminder of the cost of survival and the delicate thread of peace they now clung to. Humanity had won the day, but Kara knew that the war was far from over. Far away, aboard the retreating Obrix, Vrelks sat in his private quarters, his head bowed in grim reflection. The weight of defeat was suffocating, wrapping around him like the cold void outside his ship. He replayed the battle in his mind, searching for what he could have done differently. But one truth loomed above all: the humans were unlike any enemy the Vorgak had ever faced. They were the architects of chaos, turning desperation into triumph with a precision that defied logic. His claws tapped rhythmically against the desk as he considered his next move. The Council would demand answers, and Vrelks knew he would have to justify his decisions. But more than that, he knew the Vorgak Empire would need to adapt. The humans had shown their strength, their ingenuity, and their unbreakable will. If the Vorgak were to endure, they would need to evolve, to rethink their strategies, their traditions, and their very understanding of war. For the first time in his career, Vrelks felt a flicker of something foreign, respect tempered by apprehension. The humans were not the savages the Vorgak had once believed them to be, they were a storm, unpredictable and unstoppable. And Vrelks knew that this battle was merely the opening chapter of a far greater struggle.